that time again for selections from the Weird Library, and it's a special Halloween selections from the Weird Library. We're going for some extra spooky stuff, ghosts, goblins, things to delight you. A little bit off the beaten paranormal path this time. Some of it may seem familiar, some of it's kind of cool. Little treasures that I have. So this Halloween week, this is the week of Halloween that this is being recorded. For those of you watching in the future, uh, uh, it's Halloween all year round at the strange headquarters here, as you can see. I have my lovely assistant in the back that's just kind of hanging. Doesn't do much but hang around. I don't know what I'm paying him for, but um, let's see. Let's get right down to it. Um, we got some we got some ghosts. Want to start with ghosts? We got some local ghosts. We've got the old Yankee ghosts. This is by Hans Holzer. I'd like to think at this point that I have pretty much everything Holzer ever wrote, but I'm not really sure. He wrote so many books. Hans Holzer was like kind of the original ghost hunter. Is one way to think of it. I mean, there were people hunting ghosts before him, but in the popular mindset, um, he kind of typified the ghost hunter, and he was involved with things like the television show In Search of. You could see him on there sometimes, and sometimes he was a producer. But he wrote tons and tons of books about ghosts, others about witchcraft and ESP, and even a few about UFOs. And this one's pretty special because this is, let's see, this is the old Ace Star Edition paperback. It's one of those classic paperback covers. I love the spooky font on the front. It's all good stuff, and it covers not just New England ghosts. As far as Yankee is concerned, he includes things in like upstate New York. Um, some of these stories have been kind of, well, I don't know that you'd say debunked, but they're a little bit, people don't take them as seriously now, such as the Ocean-born Mary case in, I believe, Henniker, New Hampshire. I looked into this one a bit. The idea was that there was a woman who lived at this house um, in Henniker and was haunting it, and she had been born like on a pirate ship. There's all this crazy story about it, but I think it was really her son or son-in-law was trying to cash in on it, and people would actually dress up as ghosts to haunt the place and try to trick people into thinking it was haunted. Um, the remarkable thing about this book too is this includes. So I made a mention about New York. This includes the ghost of Gay Street. Um, so this has a complicated story. The ghost of Gay Street was a cloaked figure that was seen in this apartment, 12 Gay Street, in the like the Greenwich Village area in New York City. So people would report seeing this figure in the stairwell. Now, this is where it gets complicated. He wasn't really wearing a cloak or anything like that, or he wasn't. That's the way it gets interpreted. This is how it gets told later. But the point is that this place on Gay Street had been the home of William Gibson temporarily, prolific writer, and I'm definitely going to touch base with Gibson again because he wrote about so many things. But he was a crazy prolific writer, and he was known for writing a lot of the stories of the Shadow. The Shadow was the popular character in radio, pulp magazines, and later comic books. I'm pretty sure they made a movie at one point, um, TV show. But yeah, the Shadow knows. Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? The Shadow knows. That's the guy. So essentially, what they were seeing is the ghost of the Shadow. This was figured out later because I think the way the story goes, John Keel met William Gibson and told him about the story that Hans Holzer had written in this book. And that's how Keel found out that Gibson actually lived there at the time. And this helped John Keel develop ideas about how we can, manifest spirits, entities, all kinds of things, just through through the through the act of putting that much intention and effort into it. As I said, Gibson was prolific. I mean, the dude was just speeding away on a typewriter, coming up with these ideas. And is it possible that there was a psychic imprint left in the building of the fictional character Lamont Cranston that Gibson was writing, who had the alter ego of the Shadow? So what was being reported going up and down the stairs was a well-dressed man that was supposed to be like the Shadow's alter ego. So it's the ghost of the Shadow in the house, but he's not the Shadow. He's the Shadow's alter ego, Lamont Cranston. All gets very confusing, but you can see why people get this twisted around a bit. But that's really cool because it's just a little historic bit in there. He doesn't mention Gibson because Holzer didn't know. So that was put together later by Keel. The other thing I'll mention about this particular volume is I still have a bookmark in there. I hope this place is still around. Mainly Murders in Kennebunkport, Maine, is where I bought this. Actually, I think it was just Kennebunk, not Kennebunkport. Cool little place. It was it's like a barn that they converted into a bookstore, and it's almost entirely murder mysteries and some true crime. And I was fortunate enough to find like the one paranormal title they had there. So these when you go into these specialty kind of bookstores, I say just give all the used bookstores your business. Go in and poke around, because if you're in the mood for paranormal, if that's what you're looking for, if you're looking for weird books like I do, there's no stone that isn't worth turning over, because even in a book that's just mostly Agatha Christie and Rex Stout and crime dramas and true crime, you can still find a book like Yankee Ghosts, and that was a real gem for me to find in the store where I didn't expect to find much weird at all. So, moving on, and in theme with the cape, this is one that always catches the eye of people. If I post a shelfie, just take a picture of my bookshelf, they'll see this title jump right out at them. Or if somebody's in my home, I always get comments about this one because the title is hilarious. It's called Dracula Was a Woman in Search of the Blood Countess of Transylvania by Raymond T. McNally. It's a good hardcover edition that I have from the early 1980s. One of the best parts about this book is the back. We've got the author photo. There's Professor McNally dressed like Dracula, standing in the stairwell of some Transylvanian castle. Or perhaps it's a Wallachian castle. I'm not sure. Doesn't say where the photo was taken. But this book is primarily about Countess Elizabeth Bathory, who, McNally suggests was partly the inspiration for Stoker's Dracula, probably even more so than Vlad the Impaler. But, he's careful to tell you that, no fictional character is going to be a one-to-one description of a historical figure, because every author is putting a part of themselves into the character. They're also using mythology, they're using folklore, they're using their own imagination, and then they may incorporate bits of historical characters. So this is where I get annoyed. It's something that gets in my craw, especially this time of year, when people talk about mainly it's just posts online that go viral or bad clickbaity articles where somebody wants to definitively tell you like this was the real Dracula, or like this is definitely that, and it never is. It's too complicated. McNally was like an actual academic. He taught at, let me get this correct, I think Boston University. He was local in Boston. I know that. It's one of the Boston schools. They have several. Boston College. Yeah. Professor of Russian and East European history at Boston College. So you know that the stuff in here is good. It's not like this guy is talking out of his butt. When you look at the picture on the back, you might think, "Well, who is this nut?" But yeah, no, he was a Boston College professor for that specific period and place in the world. Um, and in addition to this, we had another college professor at Boston College named Radu Florescu, who also wrote about Dracula, and he co-wrote this one with McNally, In Search of Dracula. So it's the historical underpinnings there, and I wish I had this one in hardback. I mean, the little paperback copy is really cool, um, but yeah, this one it doesn't refute what's in that, but this one, Florescu and McNally really kind of pull it apart, and they talk about the historical Dracula. They talk about what vampirism was portrayed like in the old world. Um, let's see. They talk about the movies a little bit. So, um, yeah, I think it's important for anybody that's into ghosts, anybody that's into the paranormal. You got to learn some of your traditional monsters in case you ever have to deal with them, because you know the movies have you believe one thing, but you can't always trust the movies. it's like it's like in Return of the Living Dead. You mean the movie lied? So yeah, you want to be prepared if a vampire comes knocking at your door. And I think some of the real lessons in these books about historical monsters like vampires is and witches and ghosts is that and demons for that matter. We're not even going to get into demons today because I don't think I have time. I have all this other stuff I want to cover. But the real lesson is that historical figures are complicated, and there's a whole lot of complicated elements and moving parts and puzzle pieces that you have to pick apart and put together. And if you just try to jam them all together wrong, you end up with a ridiculous story that doesn't approximate reality well and can become dangerous fodder for vilifying others in the future. So, um, reading about Countess Bathory is not a pleasant thing, I'll have to say. I'm really glad I don't live in the 16th century Transylvania time because it's, um, you know, they were pretty brutal back then, pretty brutal. Um, but yeah, he does a really good job of picking things apart because the Bathory legend, of course, is that she was the Blood Countess. She would bathe in the blood of young virgins to become immortal, basically, to have eternal youth and beauty. So he kind of picks that apart, and there's all this political intrigue that was going on as well. Um, Fascinating stuff. Would recommend. It's more than just a funny title with a funny author photo. It's worth reading as long as you got a strong stomach for medieval torture and death and carnage. So that brings me around to we got ghosts, we got vampires, and now, of course, we need the werewolf. The werewolf, Montague Summers. So, Montague Summers, I could probably talk about all day. Um, this guy intrigues me. He's one of these characters that I can't help but have an affinity for because he's the Reverend Montague Summers, even though there is no record of him actually becoming ordained or being part of the church officially. That's what he called himself. And he spent all of his time studying crazy folklore stuff from all over the world, all different languages. He would translate it, and sometimes he doesn't translate it. So I mean, Montague Summers seems to assume from the outset that the reader is already fluent in Latin and Greek. So if you have a Latin passage or a Greek passage, you are SOL, unless you have your Latin to English dictionary handy, or your Greek to English dictionary handy and can read the Greek characters. But this book is great because the thing that sets Summers apart from a lot of folklorists and a lot of people that write about monsters is that if we're to take him at his word, the way he's writing in these books, he has a 100% belief that these things are all real and that you need to use the power of Christ to keep these things away from you. Like this is how to help, you know. Um, so you're not reading like, well, people used to think that werewolves exist, and we know that's not true, but here's some folklore about them. He's like, no, the werewolf will do this. And so, I mean, this stuff does read. Like, if you want to become a monster hunter, like, you could do worse than buying all of Montague Summers' books. So, I mean, I have most of them, I would say. I got the werewolf, I have the vampire, and there's two vampire ones. I think there's Myth and Legend and his kith and kin. Um, there's a couple witchcraft books, and in addition, he would translate and write explanatory information along with books like the Malleus Maleficarum or the Compendium Maleficarum or any of the old witch hunting manuals that were out there. So I mean, yeah, sort of like a modern day witch finder. But the thing about Summers is not sure how genuine he was with it. Maybe he thought it would make good copy to write it that way. Like I said, he wasn't officially in the church. I'm fairly certain I've read places that he was essentially a gay man living at a time when that wasn't acceptable, especially in England, especially within the church. So maybe that played into the reasoning why he wasn't really actually ordained, and maybe he was having fun with it. I've read also that he would pal around with Aleister Crowley sometimes, so that doesn't sound like something somebody would do if they were if they were that afraid of magic and witchcraft and that kind of thing. So yeah, the werewolf stuff in here is absolutely fascinating. He's got lycanthropy, the belief that you become a wolf, is actual medical disorder of lycanthropy. Um, so the werewolf, his science and practice. So you got Greek werewolves, Italian werewolves, Spanish and Portuguese. Then you got England and Wales and Scotland and Ireland. Irish werewolves are really interesting. The werewolf in France, he gets into the Beast of Gévaudan in this. Then you got, of course, the North and Russia and Germany. That gets really interesting because when you read books like this, read the old stuff. Um, uh, what you find is that if you're trying to talk about the difference between a werewolf and a vampire and a ghost and an incubus and a witch, like these are all very fluid things. Like it really kind of depends on the community, the culture, what they're afraid of, and the language. And, you know, um, a lot of the time it doesn't really matter to the people involved. They just say it's an unclean thing, it's an unholy thing. So whatever label applies is fine. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things in there about werewolvery that you wouldn't necessarily think of as werewolf. And in vampires and vampirism, there's a lot of overlap. So it's not as cut and dry. It's not as easy, and that's why I have a hell of a lot of books, because I end up, if I'm trying to be succinct and talk about these things in a fun and interesting and engaging way, I do have to constantly say this is complicated because because this book here, let's see, this one this one's roughly, oh, it's under 200 pages. It seems thicker. Um, but it's dense. It's dense. He's including a lot of old history and stuff like that, going back to like the foundation of Rome and ancient times and all kinds of stuff. So even just that book alone, or any of Summers' books, And then you have to bear in mind his alleged um, biases that are in there, whether or not that's true. Um, and then you have to compare it against other folkloric accounts and other people that wrote at the time. And what you come away with at the end of all of that is that, you know, it may not be as simple as driving a stake through the heart or just hanging up some garlic or holding up a crucifix, because because there's a whole lots of different kinds of vampires and werewolves and ghosts and witches and demons and imps and familiars and goblins and spooks and mind projected fictional characters haunting a house on Gay Street. So all of these things are exist within a wide spectrum of reality, and and who's to say what's real and what's not? So stay safe out there this Halloween, because the veil is much thinner now, and these things may be coming to get you.